Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. The Senate confirms Kash Patel as FBI director by a near party line vote. Senate Education Committee approves Linda McMahon for Education Secretary by a party line vote. Late night expected in the Senate as they vote on mostly Democratic amendments to the budget resolution, which the Republican majority is using to pass their and President Donald Trump's agenda. Vice President JD Vance is interviewed at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, as the Trump-Vance Administration marks 1 month in office. Former Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky says he's not going to run for re-election in 2026, retiring after 42 years in the Senate. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is asked about President Trump saying he wants the federal government to take over running the nation's capital. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says she will not exercise her power to remove New York City Mayor Eric Adams from office amid the controversy of the dropping of a federal corruption case against him, allegedly in exchange for helping the Trump administration on immigration enforcement. But she will appoint an inspector general to oversee the mayor's office. And the White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz is questioned about President Trump saying that Ukraine started the war with Russia. The Senate has confirmed FBI Director nominee Kash Patel for a 10-year term. The vote was 51 to 49. 2 Republicans voted no, with all Democrats, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Before the vote, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, spoke on the Senate floor.
Kash Patel has spent his career working in criminal law and national security. He spent his first 8 years after law school as a public defender in state and federal courts in Florida. In 2014, he was brought on as a terrorism prosecutor at the U.S. Department of Justice, prosecuting terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab. From there, he went to work in national security for the House Intelligence Committee and then in the first Trump administration. He worked on the National Security Council, where he handled hostage rescues, among other sensitive missions. He also served as principal deputy for the acting director of national intelligence and later as chief of staff for the acting Secretary of Defense. Mr. President, as I said, the FBI has lost trust among the American people in recent years. Much of that stems from a perception that politics has infected the FBI's important work. And it's not hard to see why. In just the last few years, the FBI field office in Richmond, Virginia, circulated a memo suggesting that traditional Catholics could be violent extremists. In 2021, the Attorney General infamously instructed the FBI to work with local law enforcement to target parents who attended school board meetings. And of course, there is the FBI's apparent double standard when it comes to investigating President Trump and his repeated failures to cooperate with congressional Republicans. Mr. President, the next director of the FBI needs to focus on rooting out politics so the FBI can enforce the law, uphold the Constitution, and keep Americans safe. The Bureau also needs a renewed focus on empowering the FBI's field office to be good partners to local law enforcement. I'm encouraged that Mr. Patel has the support of the National Police Association, the National Sheriff's Association, and multiple state attorneys general, all of whom will be his partners in law enforcement should Mr. Patel be confirmed. We've unfortunately seen that no community is immune from crime, terrorism, or illegal drugs. And we need all law enforcement working together and focused on the real threats facing our country. I look forward to working with Mr. Patel to restore the integrity of the FBI and get it focused on its critical mission.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune on the Senate floor. Several Senate Democrats held a news conference outside the FBI headquarters in Washington to oppose the Kash Patel nomination. The Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois is the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee.
We stand outside the building that Mr. Patel on one day plans to, quote, shut down and reopen the next day as a museum of the deep state. That is one of many of the bizarre political statements made by the man who is asking for 10 years as director of the FBI. After meeting with Mr. Patel and reviewing his record, questioning him at the hearing, I'm convinced he's neither the experience, the judgment, nor the temperament to lead the FBI. My Senate Republican colleagues are willfully ignoring myriad red flags about Mr. Patel, especially his recurring instinct to threaten retribution against his perceived enemies. This is an extremely dangerous flaw for someone who seeks to lead the nation's most powerful domestic investigative agency for the next 10 years. What is this all about? What is Patel's mission? It's pretty clear the first item on his mission is to revise history, to somehow blame the police for January 6th, to call the National Guard cowards in uniform, quote unquote, cowards in uniform. Before his nomination, Mr. Patel was an endless source of outrageous conspiracy theories that benefit President Trump, claiming that January 6th was, quote, never an insurrection, quote unquote, and that the FBI was, quote, planning January 6th for a year. Planning January 6th for a year, he said of the FBI. It's not only dangerous, but what he's doing is irresponsible. Mr. Patel has even gone so far as producing and selling recordings of songs performed by the January 6th rioters who violently assaulted police officers. Mr. Patel calls these rioters political prisoners. Patel's sympathies are clearly for the convicted mobsters and not the police who were their victims. And now he wants to be the director of the #1 criminal investigative agency in the world. I was there that day on January 6th, as many of my colleagues standing here with me. Those insurrectionists are not political prisoners. They were rioters on a mission from Donald Trump.
Senator Dick Durbin, the minority whip, Democrat from Illinois and ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, at a news conference with other Senate Democrats outside FBI headquarters in Washington this morning. The Senate later voted to confirm Kash Patel as FBI director. The vote was 51-49. Kash Patel takes over for an acting director who has been there since the previous director, Christopher Wray, stepped down at the start of the Donald Trump administration 3 years before his 10-year term expired because President Trump said he would fire him. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, one of the two Republicans who voted no on the Kash Patel nomination, writing on X, "My reservations with Mr. Patel stem from his own prior political activities and how they may influence his leadership. The FBI must be trusted as the federal agency that roots out crime and corruption, not focused on settling political scores." Congressman Keith Selth, Republican of Texas, posting on X, "Kash Patel has been confirmed as director of the FBI. If I was part of the deep state, I would cash in my chips and head for home." The Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee today voted along party lines 12-11 to advance the nomination of Linda McMahon for Education Secretary to the full Senate. Associated Press article noting that the vote brings her closer to leading an agency the Republican president wants to shut down. At her confirmation hearing, Linda McMahon said she wants to reorient the Education Department. Since his campaign, President Trump has called for the department to be abolished, but McMahon acknowledged that only Congress could shut it down completely. That was from the AP article. Here are some of the statements before today's vote in committee. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, is the chair.
If confirmed, Ms. McMahon has the tall task of reforming a Department of Education that has lost its purpose. For the last 4 years, the department focused on everything but student learning, with bureaucracy and red tape standing in the way of student success. We need a strong leader at the department who will get our education system back on track, and Ms. McMahon is the right person for the job. She successfully led large organizations for decades, first as a businesswoman, then as head of the Small Business Administration in President Trump's first term. Throughout the nomination process, Ms. McMahon demonstrated a strong vision for the Department of Education. She committed to empowering parents and returning powers to states and local communities, which, by the way, are best equipped to address students' needs. Ms. McMahon is steadfast in her determination to uphold the true meaning of Title IX, ensuring fairness for women and girls on the field and in the classroom. She will hold colleges and universities accountable to protect all students from discrimination, including Jewish students who have faced anti-Semitic violence and harassment since October the 7th. Ms. McMahon is the partner this committee needs to improve the nation's education system. If she is confirmed, I look forward to working with her to ensure every child has the opportunity to succeed.
Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee at today's meeting. The committee ranking member, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, spoke against the nomination.
This great nation, founded on democratic principles, founded around a separation of powers between the legislative branch, the judiciary, the executive branch, is moving more and more toward an authoritarian society where all power is resting in the hands of a few in the White House. The other day, the president, whether facetiously or not, and I suspect not quite facetiously, talked about being a king, talked about the day before, that when you're trying to quote unquote save the country, you don't have to worry about the law. Well, that is not what this country is about. That's not what the founding fathers, in their brilliance. You know, the older I get, the more I respect the work that these guys did back in the 1770s. They were nobody's fools. And they understood you don't give one branch all the power. They fought the King of England, which now takes us back to the Department of Education. And that is, in a sense, it doesn't really matter who the secretary will be, because he or she will not have the power. I think that everybody in this committee understands that we are living in a time of massive income and wealth inequality, and the Department of Education provides vital resources for 26 million kids who live in high poverty school districts. These are the kids who most need our help. Is it the responsibility of the federal government to see that every kid in America, whether you're poor, middle class, or rich, gets a quality education? In my view, it is. It really is. And that is what a lot of what the Department of Education does. Is it a perfect entity? No. Is it bureaucratic? Yes. Can we reform it? Yes. Should we abolish it? No. The Department of Education provides funding that millions of public school students with disabilities desperately need. And without federal funding, where would these kids be? It supports nearly 10 million children enrolled in rural schools. It provides Pell Grants to 7 million low-income kids to help pay for the cost of college. It enforces our federal civil rights laws to ensure all students can get a decent education no matter what the color of their skin may be, no matter what their religion is, no matter what their gender is. So, Mr. Chairman, I will vote to oppose Ms. McMahon. I respect her, I like her, but I will vote no.
Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont and ranking member on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee at today's meeting before the vote to approve the nomination of Linda McMahon for Education Secretary. The vote was 12-11, Republicans voting yes, Democrats and that independent voting no. TheHill.com has an article that reads, she is almost certain to be confirmed as no Republicans have made any public objections to her nomination, and more controversial Donald Trump picks who originally drew pushback have gone on to clear the upper chamber. This is Washington Today. Hearst Television Washington Bureau has an article. Senate Republicans are moving ahead with their two-bill budget plan despite President Donald Trump telling them not to do so. The Senate could start a lengthy all-night vote-a-rama as soon as Thursday, adding amendments one by one to advance the president's policies. Republicans are focusing their first bill on border security, military funding, and U.S. fossil fuel production. The other would focus on Trump's tax cuts. The idea was briefly put at risk after Trump bashed the proposal online, saying he favored House Republicans' one big, beautiful bill instead. The House version includes all Republican priorities, along with Trump tax cuts and slashing of government programs. That was from the Hearst Washington Bureau article. Vice President JD Vance spoke about the strategy and the agenda today at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference.
We've got this big, beautiful one-bill budget reconciliation scenario. How is that working? What are the dynamics that are happening right now in Congress and what the administration is doing to ensure that a lot of what the president is wanting to do in terms of really pushing forward with economic prosperity and his tax relief initiatives gets done in these bills?
Sure. Yeah, it's really important. So the Senate obviously has its own approach, and the president has been very clear that his preference is to put everything in one bill.
Right.
And part of that is just simple legislative strategy. I think the president has learned a lot about how D.C. works, And I actually talked to the president about this yesterday, and he said to me, look, it's very rare that you can get 2 reconciliation bills done in one Congress, which is why he thinks we've got to do a lot with that one big, beautiful bill, that first reconciliation package that we're going to get through the House and the Senate. It's going well. It's early, right? This stuff takes time to put together. I think, you know, if you had a record-pace reconciliation bill, we would get this thing done in May or in June. I think we're on track to do that. But we've got to do some basic things, Mercedes. One, like I said, we've got to continue to unleash American energy. That's part of the reconciliation bill. We've got to make sure that other countries stop taking advantage of us. That's a big part of President Trump's tariff policy, is we got to stop being taken advantage of. You know, of course, we want to make the President Trump tax cuts permanent and extend them into the future. We want no taxes on tips. We got to do some of the things we talked about during the campaign. That's got to be part of it. And then finally, and this is really important, everything the president has done on the border, we have got to empower him to do it, not just for a month, but for the next 4 years. And we've got to hire more Border Patrol agents. We got to give Tom Homan and Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem the resources they need to secure the border. And just not to return to the border, but I think so many of our issues come back to the border, because if you take 30, 40 million illegal aliens, you take Medicare fraud, Social Security fraud. Why are we taking the people's Social Security payments and giving it to illegal aliens? We know that's happening in the United States of America today. We've got to stop it. If you get control of the border, Mercedes, you do more to control the fiscal problem, the financial problems that we have in this country than almost anything. Get illegal aliens out of our country, make sure American tax dollars go to American people. That is how you solve the fiscal crisis in the United States of America.
Vice President JD Vance, interviewed by Mercedes Schlapp, who was White House Strategic Communications Director in the first Donald Trump administration, is now with CPAC at today's conference in National Harbor, Maryland. And this is the 1-month mark of the current Trump administration. Budget reconciliation, as he mentioned, is the process that cannot be filibustered in the Senate, so it can pass with a simple majority instead of the 60 votes usually needed to break a filibuster. Republicans have 53 seats in the Senate. President Trump posting on Truth Social this morning, in capital letters, "Balance budget now?" 3 question marks. "Let's give it a shot. Lots of money coming in from tariffs. Do it!" Exclamation point, DJT. The U.S. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke on the Senate floor today about what to expect when the Senate starts voting on amendments to the Republican-drafted budget resolution.
The Senate is in for a very long day and a very long night. Over the next day or so, Senate Republicans will try to advance a budget resolution that clears the way to cut taxes for Donald Trump's billionaire friends. Democrats are going to hold the floor all day long and all night long to expose how Republicans want to cut taxes for billionaires while gutting things Americans care about most: health care, jobs, public safety, national security, housing, education. This is going to be a long, drawn-out fight. This reconciliation budget bill is only the first step, albeit an important one. Days like today, where we vote on amendments late into the night, go a long way in revealing where each party stands and who each party is fighting for. Democrats are glad to have this debate. We're happy to have it a few more times if the Republican leader so wants. Democrats will show in each of these debates where Republicans truly stand deep down, not with working people, but on the side of billionaires like Elon Musk. If you become wealthy fairly and squarely, we don't begrudge you. But you're doing fine, and you certainly don't need a massive tax break. And yet that is precisely what Republicans are getting ready to do: give billionaires another tax break and make the American people pay the cost. If Senate Republicans really think the best solution for inflation is to put more money into the pockets of the billionaire class, Democrats will make sure the American people know it. We will expose Republicans' plan to cut health care so that billionaires can have another tax break. We'll expose Republican plans to gut housing, to defund NIH, stop cancer research, stop research into diseases that are hurting, harming, and even killing our loved ones. To cut nutrition, to make housing costs go up, to hurt food inspection, to stop the fight against bird flu here or Ebola overseas so that they don't harm us, doing all those things that make no sense so they can cut taxes for billionaires? No way, we say.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. The back-to-back votes on amendments to the budget resolution that could happen tonight are known as a vote-a-rama. And as Senator Schumer said, it could take all night. The record, according to the U.S. Senate website, is 44 votes on a budget resolution back in 2008. While the Senate is working on a budget resolution that covers border security, energy, and defense, the House next week plans to vote on a larger budget resolution that also has trillions of dollars in tax cuts and spending cuts. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, spoke about this at CPAC today.
Mr. Speaker, we keep hearing about this one big, beautiful bill. Tell me how big, how beautiful?
Oh, it's going to be so big. I shouldn't do it in that voice. So the beauty of reconciliation, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on the procedure, but normally you need a 60-vote threshold in the Senate to do anything of substance, but budget reconciliation is the one exception to the process where you only need 51 votes in the Senate, a bare majority. So we're going to use this reconciliation process to achieve most of the priorities that we ran on in the election cycle and that President Trump, that's right, committed to. So I could be here a long time listing all those things, but clearly it's the most important interest of the country. We're going to secure that border once and for all. We're going to do that. We're going to get the economy going again, American economy going, make sure that we don't have the largest tax increase in U.S. history, which is what would happen by default at the end of this year if we fail in this mission, because the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extensions expire, the cuts expire. We're going to get the economy going. We're going to get back to American energy dominance in this bill. Yep. And we're going to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state, get the bureaucracy back in check. Lots of details, lots of subcategories under all that, but it's going to be a big, beautiful bill, and it has to be by necessity because that gives us the highest probability of success, remembering that I have a small margin in the House. I have one vote for much of this. What could go wrong, Rob? It's going to be fine.
Right.
But everybody is committed to delivering the America First agenda, and that's why we're going to get it done.
House Speaker Mike Johnson at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, meeting at National Harbor, Maryland, just south of Washington, D.C. Both the House version of the budget resolution and the Senate version of the budget resolution contains money for enhanced border security. And today, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, was in the White House briefing room on this 1 month of the Trump presidency to talk about the border. He said, "The criminals are going home. The border is sealed shut. America is safe, sovereign, and proud and free. We are a nation everyone understands. You do not come here illegally. You will not get in. You will go to jail, and you will go home. You will not succeed." And Stephen Miller said border crossings are down 95% since President Trump took office. A reporter asked him about an NBC News article citing a person familiar with President Trump's thinking that the president is angry that more people are not being deported.
There have been reports that Trump is unhappy with the rate of deportations and he wants them to be higher. Is the president happy with the rate of deportations, and are there any plans to speed up the process?
Well, first of all, we all appreciate the encouragement from the media to deport as many illegal aliens as humanly possible. So thank you, and I will promise you that the full might of the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, and every element and instrument of national power will be used to remove, with speed, all criminal illegals from the soil of the United States of America, to enforce final removal orders, and to ensure that this country is for American citizens and those who legally belong in this country. We inherited an ICE that was completely shuttered. we inherited a Department of Homeland Security whose sole mission was to resettle illegal aliens within the United States of America. In 30 days, the president sealed the border shut, declared the cartels to be terrorist organizations, has increased ICE deportations to levels not seen in decades, and we are shortly on the verge of achieving a pace and speed of deportations this country has never before seen. Thank you.
Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller at today's White House briefing. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said at the briefing that President Trump has signed 73 executive orders in the month he's been in office, and also will be hosting his first official cabinet meeting next week. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, announced today that she will not use her authority to remove New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, but will name a deputy inspector general to oversee his office and affairs. WNBC in New York writes that Adams' mayoralty spiraled into a political crisis after the Justice Department ordered prosecutors on January 10th to drop the bribery and other charges against him. Adams has pleaded not guilty. Several career prosecutors and supervisors of public corruption cases resigned rather than carry out what they saw as an improper, politically based dismissal of the charges. One of those who resigned was the interim U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, who wrote that Adams' lawyers offered his cooperation on immigration policy in exchange for getting the case dismissed. The Adams attorneys have denied any quid pro quo offer, while saying that they told prosecutors when asked that the case was impeding the mayor's immigration enforcement efforts. That was the article from WNBC TV. Governor Hochul held a news conference today in New York City.
I want to take a moment to put this all in context. New York is facing a grave threat from Washington. The Trump administration has said is already trying to use the legal jeopardy facing our mayor as leverage to squeeze and punish our city. The president's already trying to weaken our public transit system and undermine our state sovereignty. I call it the Trump revenge tour, and I have to stand in its way. Not surprising, he's taking out his anger and frustration over the 35 felony convictions he received here in the state of New York, taking out on our own New Yorkers. And as governor, I will be the vanguard against harm to our state and our people, and nothing will stand in our way. Once I have made a decision, I execute it, work hard to make it work. My decision today did not come lightly, but the path forward for me is clear. I will retain the powers conferred upon me by the New York State Constitution, the City Charter, but it's my sincere hope that these dark days will pass, elections will occur, and the people of New York will decide who they trust to govern this extraordinary city.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, at a news conference in New York City. A federal judge is currently weighing whether to dismiss the federal corruption case against Mayor Adams, as the Justice Department has requested. Attorney General Pam Bondi spoke to this today at the CPAC meeting in National Harbor, Maryland.
So Pam, the media are going crazy about New York Mayor Eric Adams and the charges that were dismissed against him.
So glad you brought that up.
Tell us what the story is, what happened there, and why were the charges dismissed?
Sure. And Emil, who has done an incredible job, he worked on this case, he looked at this case. It was an incredibly weak case filed to make deportation harder. That's why they did it. They took one of the biggest mayors in the country off the playing field in order to protect their sanctuary city. This case, it was so incredibly weak. It was about increases in airline tickets, upgrades in airline tickets in his official capacity, without getting into all the details of the fact. I don't even think it could survive a verdict. Excuse me. Incredibly weak case. That is the weaponization of government.
That's lawfare.
That's lawfare. When you're filing cases like that to keep someone who criticized Joe Biden, who said they took away his security clearance, so he could not get the details, so he could not help enforce the deportation efforts in New York. And, you know, these people are going after him. Ride a subway in New York. It's not safe.
Yep.
Violent crime is at an all-time high, and that's what they're doing. So it's not about weaponization. It's about ending their weaponization of the government and fighting violent crime and enabling cities like New York and mayors like Eric Adams to enforce Donald Trump's immigration policies.
Attorney General Pam Bondi and Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. Wall Street today, the Dow down 450, NASDAQ down 93, S&P down 26. Washington today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN Now is a free mobile app featuring your unfiltered view of what's happening in Washington, live and on demand. Keep up with the day's biggest events with live streams of floor proceedings and hearings from the U.S. Congress, White House events, the courts, campaigns, and more from the world of politics, all at your fingertips. You can also stay current with the latest episodes of Washington Journal and find scheduling information for C-SPAN's TV networks and C-SPAN Radio, plus a variety of compelling podcasts. C-SPAN Now is available at the Apple Store and Google Play, or visit our website, cspan.org/cspan now. C-SPAN Now, your front row seat to Washington, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From NBC News, Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, the longest-serving Senate leader in history, announced on his 83rd birthday Thursday that he won't seek re-election next year, bringing an end to his 4-decade career in the chamber. McConnell, elected in 1984, climbed his way up to the Senate Republican leader position in 2007 and remained there until early 2025, serving during 4 administrations in the majority and the minority. He will leave behind a complex legacy and a party that has transformed away from traditional conservatism into one led by President Donald Trump, with whom the Kentucky Republican has long had a frosty relationship. That was from NBC News. Senator McConnell made the announcement today on the Senate floor.
7 times my fellow Kentuckians have sent me to the Senate. Every day in between, I've been humbled by the trust they placed in me to do their business right here. Representing our Commonwealth has been the honor of a lifetime. I will not seek this honor an 8th time. My current term in the Senate will be my last.
Senator Mitch McConnell today on the Senate floor, the start of a 15-minute speech about his decision, his reflections on his career, thank yous to family and friends who helped along the way, and a pledge to work the remaining 2 years on strengthening national defense. At the end of the speech, he said he still has faith in the institution that he's served in for so long.
In our work, most of us in this body develop an appreciation for the Senate itself, its written rules, its collegial norms, its pace of play. And yet so often I've watched colleagues depart, venting their frustration at the confines of the institution or mourning what they perceive to be decline of its norms. Regardless of the political storms that may wash over this chamber during the time I have remaining, I assure our colleagues that I will depart with great hope for the endurance of the Senate as an institution. There are any number of reasons for pessimism, but the strength of the Senate is not one of them. This chamber is still the haven where the political minority can require debate. It's still the crucible in which jurists are tested for their fidelity to upholding the Constitution and lives and laws as they were written. The Senate is still equipped for work of great consequence. And to the disappointment of my critics, I'm still here on the job. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator, North Carolina.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the members and staff and spectators in the gallery be allowed to applaud for a period not to exceed 30 seconds.
Is there objection?
Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, on the Senate floor announcing he will not seek re-election in 2026. Some people already lining up to enter or consider running for that open seat. Republican former state attorney general Daniel Cameron, who's also a former aide to Senator McConnell, says he is running. Congressman Andy Barr, a Republican of Kentucky, says he'll make a decision soon. Congressman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, says through a spokesperson he'll not run for the Senate in 2026, but may run for governor the next year. And the current governor, Andy Beshear, a Democrat, through his campaign manager, tells NBC News he will not run for this open seat. From Associated Press, President Donald Trump marked Black History Month at the White House on Thursday by making an appearance at a celebratory reception with a surprise guest, golf legend Tiger Woods, while calling out other athletes in attendance and marveling at the size of the crowd. Trump also announced he planned to bring Alice Johnson, a prison reform advocate whom he pardoned in 2020, into his administration to work on clemency issues. The White House's Black History Month reception preserved a tradition, but it comes in the wake of Trump's issuing a wide-ranging executive order ending the federal government's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs has disrupted its observance elsewhere. Trump didn't mention his anti-DEI crusade as he addressed hundreds of guests in a reception in the East Room, though he did make brief reference to the New York Times 1619 Project, which highlights the lasting consequences of slavery in America. That was from Associated Press. Here's part of the president's remarks.
The last administration tried to reduce all of American history to a single year, 1619, but under our administration, we honor the indispensable role Black Americans have always played in the immortal cause of another date, 1776. We like 1776. In the very first skirmish of the Revolutionary War at Lexington Green, an enslaved black man named Prince Estabrook, you know Prince Estabrook? Yeah. Answered history's call and fought as the Minutemen alongside the other patriots of the very small Massachusetts town. Couldn't protect itself, but they did a good job. Prince was wounded in the early morning battle, becoming not only the first African-American soldier to fight in the Revolution, but among the very first Americans to spill their blood. One of the first in the nation to spill blood in that very, very tough time. Soon Estabrook joined the Continental Army and ultimately won his own freedom along with that of his fellow Americans. His legacy will endure, and we're very proud to honor him today. It's a very important day in our country, and we honor him. First person to spill blood happened to be Tim Estabrook. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we will be including the statue of Prince Estabrook in our new National Garden of American Heroes. We're going to be doing a garden of American heroes. And now that I think of it, I must tell you, sadly, most of them, I guess all of them are not with us any longer. I was going to put Tiger in the garden, but maybe you don't want to be there. I maybe should wait a little bit, huh? Like about 50, I think I'm going to wait about 50 years, all right? But Tiger's going to make it, okay? But I'm a little afraid to tell him yes, because he'd be the only one that's living. I don't know, Tiger. Tiger's rejecting that offer, right? Under the executive order I signed last month, this new beautiful outdoor statue park. It's going to be a statue park. It's going to be unbelievable. We're picking the final sites now. It's between various states that want it very badly. We'll honor hundreds of our greatest Americans to ever live, including countless Black Americans, icons. The garden will predominantly feature incredible women like Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Billie Holiday, Aretha Franklin, and Coretta Scott King. And I will showcase it will be something very extraordinary. It's going to be producing, we're going to produce some of the most beautiful works of art in the form of a statue for men like Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Jackie Robinson, what a great athlete that was, Martin Luther King Jr., Muhammad Ali, he's not a bad athlete. What do you think, Muhammad? Not too bad. and the late Kobe Bryant. People love Kobe Bryant.
President Donald Trump at a Black History Month celebration at the White House today. Story from NBC4 in Washington. President Donald Trump on Wednesday threw his support behind congressional efforts for a federal takeover of the nation's capital, saying he approves putting the District of Columbia back under direct federal control. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump complained about crime and homelessness in the district. Under terms of the city's home rule authority, Congress already vets all D.C. laws and can outright overturn them. Some congressional Republicans have sought to go further, eroding decades of the city's limited autonomy and putting it back under direct federal control as it was at its founding. That was from the NBC4 article. Here is President Trump on Air Force One Wednesday night.
Senator, do you think D.C. should govern itself, or do you think that governing of District of Columbia should go back to Congress?
I think that we should govern District of Columbia. It's so important, the D.C. situation. I think that we should run it strong, run it with law and order, make it absolutely flawlessly beautiful, and I think we should take over Washington, D.C., make it safe. People are getting killed, people are being hurt. You have a great police department there, but somehow they're not utilized properly. We should govern D.C. I think the federal government should take over the governance of D.C. and run it really, really properly. And I like the mayor. I get along great with the mayor. But they're not doing the job. Too much crime, too much graffiti, too many tents on the lawns of these magnificent lawns, and there's tents. And, you know, it's a sad thing. You know, homeless people all over the place, and we got to take care of the homeless. But you can't have that in Washington, D.C. You know, when they come over to see me, like Macron is coming, and the Prime Minister of UK is coming, and all these people are coming over to see me. We'll have ultimately President Xi, and we'll have everybody coming, right? And you can't let that be. You just can't let that happen. You can't have tents all over your beautiful, your once magnificent plazas and lawns. You just can't do it.
President Donald Trump holding a news conference flying on Air Force One Wednesday night. Today, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, was asked at a news conference about the proposal.
We're all here because we want to ask you about the president's remarks on Air Force One last night. You put out a tweet stating facts about D.C., but what do you say to the President of the United States, who has once again threatened to take over the city that you govern?
Well, Mark, similar to what I've told you in previous days, we will brief the president, give him the facts, work with him cooperatively on our shared priorities and areas where he has concerns. So I've made that offer once again to the White House.
Can I ask you about that? Have you reached out to the White House since his remarks last night? And can you tell us anything, like, how does that work? Who do you speak to?
I have, and I haven't spoken to anyone yet.
Can I ask you what you think this uncertainty does to that, you know, the bigger picture of the uncertainty of who is going to be running the District of Columbia does to your ability to manage the city? For instance, what would it do to your ability to borrow money?
We don't approach our work with any uncertainty. I was elected. I'm the duly elected mayor of the District of Columbia and the lawful CEO of the District of Columbia. So we don't approach our work with any uncertainty. But having said that, it makes people very anxious. It makes people in our community anxious. It makes our policymakers anxious, our businesses anxious. And that's just an unnecessary distraction. So we want to, as I've said, since President Trump was elected, we want to work on shared priorities with him. He's been busily making changes in the federal workforce. You know, while we want people to come back to work, we've seen some of it, but we've also seen a lot of job loss. So we know that the kind of, how should I say, this clean and safe aspects of what we do in government operations is just as important to us, more important to us, I dare say, than anybody in the federal government. And there are opportunities for us to work together on that.
Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, at a news conference in the city today. And this is Washington Today. Turning to foreign affairs, from the Washington Post, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with President Trump's envoy on Thursday. as barbed exchanges between the two leaders deepened uncertainty about the future of U.S. backing for Kyiv. Retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, Trump's envoy for the war in Ukraine, arrived in Kyiv soon after the spat erupted, with Trump describing the Ukrainian president as failing and blaming him for Russia's 2022 invasion of the country. Zelensky countered that Trump was repeating misinformation about him and the war. Ukrainian officials appeared seeking to calm the waters during Kellogg's visit on Thursday, though it was not immediately clear how his meeting with Zelensky went, as the two did not hold a planned press briefing afterward. That was from the Washington Post. At the White House today, the National Security Advisor Michael Waltz was asked about all of this.
After the president's post on Truth Social yesterday, need to know, who does he think is more responsible for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Putin or Zelensky?
Well, look, his goal, Peter, is to bring this war to an end, period. And there has been ongoing fighting on both sides. It is World War I style trench warfare. His frustration with President Zelensky that you've heard is multifold. One, there needs to be a deep appreciation for what the American people, what the American taxpayer, what President Trump did in his first term, and what we've done since. So some of the rhetoric coming out of Kyiv, frankly, and insults to President Trump were unacceptable, number one. Number two, our own Secretary of Treasury personally made the trip to offer the Ukrainians what can only be described as a historic opportunity. That is for America to co-invest with Ukraine in their minerals, in their resources, to truly grow the pie. So case in point, there's a foundry that processes aluminum in Ukraine. It's been damaged. It's not at its current capacity. If that is restored, it would account for America's entire imports of aluminum for an entire year. That one foundry. There are tremendous resources there. Not only is that long-term security for Ukraine, not only do we help them grow the pie with investments, but we do have an obligation to the American taxpayer in helping them recoup the hundreds of billions that have occurred. So, rather than enter into some constructive conversations about what that deal should be going forward, we got a lot of rhetoric in the media that was incredibly unfortunate. And I could just tell you, Peter, as a veteran, as somebody who's been in combat, this war is horrific. And I think we've lost sight of that, of the literally thousands of people that are dying a day, families that are going without the next generation. And I find it kind of, frankly ridiculous. So many people in Washington that were just demanding, pounding the table for a ceasefire in Gaza are suddenly aghast that the president would demand one and both sides come to the table when it comes to Ukraine, a war that has been arguably far greater in scope and scale and far more dangerous in terms of global escalation to U.S. security.
White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz at a news conference in the White House briefing room. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted on Telegram after his meeting today with U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg. I had a productive meeting with General Kellogg, a good discussion, many important details. I am grateful to the United States for all the assistance and bipartisan support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. It's important for us and for the entire free world that American strength is felt. We had a detailed conversation about the battlefield situation, how to return our prisoners of war, and effective security guarantees. Ukraine is ready for a strong, effective investment and security agreement with the President of the United States. We have proposed the fastest and most constructive way to achieve results. Our team is ready to work 24/7. Success unites us all. Strong Ukraine-U.S. relations benefits the entire world. Part of the post from President Zelensky. And Reuters has an article. The U.S. is refusing to co-sponsor a draft UN resolution marking 3 years since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine that backs Ukraine's territorial integrity and again demands Russia withdraw its troops. 3 diplomatic sources told Reuters in a potential stark shift by Ukraine's most powerful Western ally. That was from Reuters. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.